welcome to Microlive. Now this week we're looking at a disaster from 20 years ago and seeing how this computer model would help if it happens again. We take to the air with British Airways to follow their information network around the world.
And we find out how computer-assisted learning is moving into nurseries as 3-year-olds put software through its paces.
On the 18th of March 1967, the Torrey Canyon was carrying 100,000 tonnes of crude oil. She ran at full speed into the Seven Stones Reef off the Isles of Scilly. Oil immediately gushed from her damaged hull and drifted towards the beaches of Cornwall. Pollution on this scale had never happened before, and there was no clear strategy for dealing with it. Every available drum of detergent was sent to the area, and the Royal Navy organised a fleet of small ships. There was a desperate attempt to disperse the oil while it was still at sea, but in places the slick was almost 2 feet thick. By the end of the week, the oil started to come ashore. It fouled the beaches and killed thousands of seabirds. The only hope was for salvage tugs to tow the tanker off the reef while most of the oil was still aboard. But the attempt failed. The tanker broke her back and the remaining cargo flooded into the sea. There was now no way of stopping the oil from reaching the beaches, and every tide brought in more. Finally, 10 days after she went aground, the ship was blown up. But it was too late. The oil had already escaped. As the Torrey Canyon burnt, Britain faced an environmental catastrophe.
Now, when the Torrey Canyon went aground, plans to avert further disaster were hastily made. And although much of the effort was wasted, important lessons were learned. In particular, the need for good coordination. If the same thing happened today, 20 years later, things should be very different. A lot more is now known about how slicks can be broken up. A slick can be spotted much more easily from the air, and therefore dispersant sprayed from an aircraft will be much more accurate. In Britain, the Department of Transport has a fleet of specially equipped spraying aircraft kept on permanent 30-minute standby. This control room is the headquarters of the government's Marine Pollution Control Unit. It's run by Admiral Michael Stacey, and it's from here that both the spraying aircraft and efforts on the ground would be coordinated. But just keeping track of a slick is far from easy. Anything from the size of the waves to the type of oil can affect the way that it moves, and of course it can't be followed at night. So, for the past 3 years, the unit has been using a computer modelling system that can take account of all the variables and produce very rapid forecasts of the slick's movements.
And this is the system that Admiral Stacey and his colleagues are using. It's running on a Plessey Microvac, so it's well out of the PC league, and indeed it needs to be. Mike Unsworth from Psychon wrote this software, so Mike, what can it do?
Well, this is an oil spill simulation system which is used to model the behaviour of oil at sea. The system takes into account oil evaporation, dispersion, spreading, and also advection due to winds and tides.
Right, now I recognise the coastline of Cornwall there. What else can we see on the screen?
That's right. Well, we can also see an asterisk which denotes the position of the Torrey Canyon itself, and the blue area around it is oil which has leaked out of the tanker and is moving in a southeasterly direction.
Of course, there are different types of oil. What does the computer need to know about this particular type?
Yes, well, the oil characteristics are quite important, and the system needs to know about the evaporation, spreading and dispersion properties for the oil that's been spilt.
Out of all these variables, what predictions can it make?
Well, the system predicts the amount of oil that's out at sea and also the amount of oil that's beached on the coastline.
Does it work?
Yes, the system has been validated against laboratory experiments and also against real incidents such as the Torrey Canyon one.
Oh, thank you, Mike. Well, earlier today we did test it to see if it works. We asked the computer to plot out its version of what happened 20 years ago. Here's the result. These are printouts from a colour plotter. And you can see the oil slick spreading out southeast from the tanker. With a slight northwesterly wind, it looks for a while as if the oil might miss the beaches altogether. The slick even shows some signs of breaking up. But now comes a change. A southwesterly gale springs up and the oil heads for Cornwall. In fact, by the Friday night, the first oil, shown here in red, did come ashore. Throughout the weekend, the oil comes ashore in large quantities and spreads along the north coast as well. On Sunday nights, the tanker breaks its back and releases still more oil. But another northwesterly gale drives most of it out to sea. In the changing winds, a little more oil does come ashore, but most of it is dispersing in the English Channel. And almost 3 weeks after the accident, oil is spread along more than 100 miles of coast. On this chart, we've marked where the oil was actually cleared from the beaches. Compared with a computer model, it shows some oil rather further north, beyond Newquay. Now, of course, this chart is based on where the oil was actually cleared from, so it doesn't include inaccessible places, inaccessible coves and rocks such as these down here. Obviously, the main effort went into clearing the tourist areas. Along the south coast here, the oil got as far as the Lizard, which is exactly what the computer predicted. Well, that's what did happen 20 years ago, but Mike is now starting another run, and this time he's feeding in the actions that Admiral Stacey thinks his unit would take today. Later, we'll find out if that strategy is any better.
A yellow round one.
A red one.
Rolling that out, just see how many you can fit on, all right? That's it. The first few years of a child's life are very physical. They like to touch, to press, to push, to pull, to climb on things. And where better to get that sort of experience than in a well-run playgroup? Well, here at Waldeck Nursery in West London, they've got all the usual equipment. But the children here have got something else to play with as well. A £40 Electron with an ordinary TV and tape recorder. A whole keyboard of buttons to press, bright colours and pictures to make. Even before the children understand the games, there's the physical pleasure of choosing keys and pressing them. I was surprised at just how easily the children seemed to have taken to the technology, a view shared by Jane Harris, one of the teachers here at Waldeck.
Yes, it's amazing how quickly they do learn to work it. They have to learn a couple of things, of course, to be able to use the computer. They have to learn that each game has its own rules for a start, which could be confusing. They don't find it confusing. And they've also got to learn to be adept with the keys.
And that comes fairly quickly?
It comes amazingly quickly, yes.
Do you teach them how to use the computer? I mean, do you sit them down and show them what to do?
Well, we tried that in the beginning. That's not the time-efficient way to do it at all. We find that it's much easier if the children just stand and watch while someone else is playing, and then they pick it up that way. Or one child on their own might just learn how to do it through trial and error.
Each time Alison presses a key, Ben copies it and gets the reward of more of the picture. Sometimes Alison has to count along the keys to get the right number, and others she can recognise right away.
Finished.
But they're only playing very simple games, aren't they?
Oh, you'd be surprised. No, certainly not. We are amazed at the amount of complex games they can do. Whatever we put in front of them, at some level or another, they seem to be able to do it. We started off by giving them really easy things, gradually introduced the others, and they seem to be able to cope with numbers, shapes, colours, matching, grids, everything.
Now, what am I supposed to do with this, Alison? How do you start playing it?
1.
Number 1. Right, and why have I got to press a number 1? So you're matching up the pairs. And do you find that an easy thing to do?
Yes.
You do? Right, you do the next one then.
2.
You can't just load up the first piece of educational software that you can lay your hands on and hope that it's going to work for children of Anna's age. The software's got to be very carefully chosen and carefully written. For a start, children of Anna's age can't read, so obviously a screen full of written instructions is going to be completely lost on them. In fact, it would probably turn them off the whole idea. Then the less key presses they have to make, the better, and the keys should be easily recognisable. And some software packages include a guide, a sort of template that points up the keys, the ones that they should press. Why do you like this game?
Because it's got numbers
And you like being able to recognise the numbers, do you?
Because I don't know how to count. I do all wrong when I count. I mix up all the numbers.
You don't do it wrong now, do you?
No, because when I've got a counting game, I don't do it wrong.
One of the games was written especially for the nursery by Jane's husband. It looks deceptively simple. It involves a rubbish collector who has to be guided around the maze, tidying up by collecting tin cans and apple cores. But working out a route through the maze is a form of problem solving, and it takes a lot of concentration and thought before any of the keys can be pressed. They seem to spend an awful lot of time sitting in front of the screen.
Well, it does depend on how difficult the child finds the game. If the child finds it an easy game, he won't sit for very long. If he finds it too difficult, he won't sit for very long. But if it's just right, then he'll stay there, play it maybe 2 or 3 times over. And that's really training his concentration. He learns to sit and concentrate on one thing for quite a long time.
Without realising he's doing it, presumably?
Yes. And then that will carry over to other games, other activities that he's doing.
And you obviously feel this is a great advantage to children in later life, in their school life and things.
Well, I do think that a child going into school has a lot of problems to face, and if he goes with a good concentration span, that's half the battle won almost. I mean, he's going to have no problems with learning if he can sit down by himself and concentrate on his work.
Well, whether an individual child plays with a computer or not really doesn't matter. The fact that there's one in the corner of the room makes it part of the furniture, and therefore it's part of their everyday lives. Of course, the shape of computers and what they can do will have changed radically by the time these children grow up. But one thing's for sure, unlike many of my generation, these budding adults will never be intimidated by the chip or tomorrow's technology.
One problem Waldeck Nursery had was finding suitable software. Some of their children are under 3 and can only use the very simplest programs. The high street stores don't seem to offer much help these days. They learned long ago you don't get rich selling educational software, and they never did offer the kind of expertise to be able to advise. Well, here's one answer: to browse through magazines like these. They sometimes carry useful reviews of educational software, or you could try looking through the small ads at the back. But of course, there's no guarantee that what you'll find there is any good. Some software houses do have a good name for educational games. One of them is Mirrorsoft, with their popular Mr. Men programs. They come for a wide range of home micros. This one, the Mr. Men Magic Story Maker, introduces pre-reading and writing concepts, and it got some rave reviews. Basically, the child has to build up a scene by choosing from locations. We'll have the garden, why not? Who should we have in it? Mr. Small. And at first, the child is choosing from these icons at the bottom of the screen. We'll have a rainy day, and we'll have him sad. Fair enough. To begin with, that seems quite simple, just choosing from the pictures, but later you can select another option from this menu here. Let's choose option 5, and here you see we're actually beginning to type, to read and write, to build up our scene. So it's a game that would suit a wide range of age and ability. And another highly recommended software house is ESM, Educational Software for Microcomputers. Like Mirrorsoft, their packages include a parent's book with further ideas. This program is Colorcopter, which explores matching and sorting activities with shapes, colours and with words. All I've got to do is decide which colour that is. Well, it looks to me as though it's blue, so I select the blue key here, and off goes the Colorcopter to sort it for me. That's in the early stages. I use this template, but there are a variety of others. As I get more advanced, I can identify the colour from the initial, and later by reading the word itself. So again, what starts as a simple matching activity turns into a reading game. In our programme notes this month, we've compiled a list of helpful addresses if you're looking for educational software, including publishers who, of course, will be happy to send you their catalogues. And this retailer's catalogue is quite useful too. It's free, just the postage to pay, and inside it, Rickett Educational Media have listed all their primary stock with full descriptions and screenshots. Now, because they're not tied to any particular software house, their recommendations should be unbiased. They'll even give you advice over the phone for your particular child. Their address is also in our notes.